Hey guys! Tonight we are going to trade the bright, sterile aisles of the modern supermarket for the damp, dark soil of a medieval garden. We'll be digging into a world of forgotten flavors, plants that were once the heart of the kitchen but have since vanished into obscurity. Imagine a garden not of perfectly uniform carrots and genetically flawless tomatoes, but a chaotic patch of strange roots, powerful herbs, and life-saving weeds. It's a world where the line between food, medicine, and poison was dangerously thin. Frankly, given the lack of food safety and the sheer weirdness of some of these plants, if you were suddenly transported back, you probably won't survive this dinner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing when and where you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey begins on a cold, quiet morning in late winter. The air has a sharp, metallic bite to it, and the ground is hard with a stubborn frost that refuses to yield to the pale, watery sun. You are standing in a garden, but it's not a place of vibrant life. The skeletal remains of last year's beanstalks cling to their frames, and the herb beds are little more than mounds of dormant, gray earth. The larder is growing bare. The salted meat is dwindling, the dried peas are nearly gone, and the thought of another bowl of thin oat gruel is enough to make you sigh. But you are not without hope. You have a spade in your hand, its iron edge cold to the touch, and you are heading for a patch of unassuming, withered stems in the far corner of the garden. You are here to make a withdrawal from your vegetable savings account. You approach the spot, your boots crunching on the frozen soil. All that's left of the plant above ground are the dead, feathery leaves and the dry, brown stalks of last year's flower heads. To a modern eye, it looks like nothing, a patch of dead weeds. But you know better. You set the blade of your spade into the earth a little distance from the center of the plant and push down with your foot. The ground groans in protest, but finally gives way with a satisfying crack. You work your way around the clump, loosening the soil, the cold seeping into your hands and up your arms. With a final, deep heave, you lift a large mass of earth. And there, tangled in the dark soil, is your treasure. It's a peculiar-looking thing. Not a single, neat root like a carrot or a parsnip, but a dense, crowded cluster of them, all growing from a central crown. There are dozens of slender, pale roots, some as thick as your thumb, others no bigger than a quill. They are a luminous, creamy white, almost glowing against the black earth. This is Skirret, or Cicerum, a vegetable once prized across Europe, from the tables of Roman emperors to the monasteries of medieval England, now almost completely forgotten. You brush the dirt away, admiring the strange, multi-limbed bunch. It's not a pretty vegetable, not by modern standards. It's fiddly and a bit chaotic, but in the bleakness of late winter, it's a beautiful sight. This isn't just some humble peasant food, either. Skirret has a noble and ancient pedigree. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Roman Emperor Tiberius was so enamored with its sweet flavor that he demanded it be imported to Rome each year from the Rhine Valley in Germany, where it grew wild. He considered it a delicacy worthy of his imperial table. Its popularity continued for centuries. It was a staple in the gardens of Charlemagne and a prized ingredient in the kitchens of Tudor England. Before the widespread cultivation of sugarcane made sweetness a common commodity, naturally sweet vegetables like skirret and parsnips were the stars of the culinary world, used in savory dishes and desserts alike. You carry your frosty bunch of roots back to the dim, smoky kitchen. A fire crackles in the hearth, offering the only real warmth. Your first task is to clean them, plunging the roots into a wooden bucket of icy water and scrubbing away the stubborn, frozen mud. As they become clean, you can see their strange beauty more clearly. They look like a handful of ivory fingers. Now comes the part that likely led to Skirret's downfall, the preparation. You take a small knife and begin to separate the individual roots from the crown. You notice that each one, no matter how slender, has a tough, woody core running through its center, a bit like a piece of string. This is inedible and must be removed. For the thicker roots, you can slice them in half and cut the core out. For the smaller ones, it's almost impossible, so you learn to simply cook them and eat around it. It's a slow, patient process, and you can easily understand why a future generation might prefer the simple, solid flesh of a potato. Historians still argue whether the decline of Skirret's popularity was due to the rising availability of the potato, which was less fiddly to prepare, or a shift in culinary tastes that favored less sweet savory dishes. For you, right now, with hunger gnawing at your belly, this small effort is more than worth it. With the roots prepared, you have options. Skirret can be boiled and mashed, roasted until it caramelizes, or fried in a simple batter to make crispy, sweet fritters. It was a common ingredient in a rich stew called Skirret pottage, and its sweetness made it a natural fit for pies and tarts, often mixed with spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. This brings us to a quirky tidbit of culinary history. The 17th century writer John Warlidge, in his book on gardening, described Skirret as the sweetest, whitest, and most pleasant of roots, and gave detailed instructions not just for cooking it, but for candying it. The roots would be boiled, the core removed, and then they would be steeped in a hot sugar syrup, sometimes scented with orange flower water, until they became a translucent, sweet confection. Imagine that. A candy made from a root vegetable. It makes you realize that carrot cake really does have ancient roots, in every sense of the word. Tonight, however, your tastes are simpler. You decide to roast them. You lay the pale roots on a hot stone at the edge of the hearth, turning them occasionally with a pair of iron fire tongs. As they cook, a wonderful aroma begins to fill the kitchen, sweet, nutty, and earthy, like a parsnip that's been dreaming of being a sweet potato. The natural sugars in the root begin to caramelize, and the pale flesh turns a beautiful, tempting golden brown. Finally, they are ready. You pull them from the embers, blowing on your fingers as you pick one up. It's soft and tender. You take a bite. The flavor is a revelation. It's intensely sweet, but not cloying. It has the earthy depth of a parsnip and the nutty, satisfying flavor of a roasted chestnut, with a creamy texture that almost melts in your mouth. You eat around the tiny core in the center without a second thought. It's a simple meal, but it's deeply nourishing and satisfying in a way that thin gruel could never be. It tastes like the earth's hidden sugar, a promise of sweetness kept safe underground all winter long. This is why Skirret is a vegetable savings account. It's a hardy perennial. When you harvested the roots, you could have taken a few of the smaller ones and replanted them, and next year, you'd have a whole new crop. It doesn't need to be dug up in the autumn and stored. It happily sits in the frozen ground, waiting for you to come and get it. It asks for very little and gives back so much. In a world of uncertainty, where a bad harvest or a long winter could mean starvation, a plant like this isn't just food, it's security. It's a bit like having a bank that pays interest in calories and vitamins, and is completely immune to market crashes. You just need to be willing to do the digging. You finish your meal, the comforting sweetness of the Skirret a warm presence in your stomach. You feel a sense of quiet contentment. You have worked with the cold earth and it has rewarded you. You glance out the small, grimy window. The garden is settling into the deep blue of twilight, the frost beginning to harden again on the dark soil. The Skirret was one secret the winter ground was willing to share. But as you look out at the dormant beds, you can't help but wonder what other hidden treasures might be lurking just beneath the surface, sleeping in the cold, dark, and silent earth, waiting to be discovered. The warmth of the roasted Skirret still lingers in your belly, a sweet and welcome defiance against the winter chill. That small, successful harvest from the frozen earth has emboldened you. You feel a quiet sense of partnership with this dormant garden, a feeling that it might have more secrets to share if you are only willing to put in the effort. The sun is still low in the sky, its light thin and pale, but there is enough of it to work by. You pull your wool cloak tighter, pick up your spade, and venture back out into the cold. You are going digging again, this time for a treasure of a different kind, not one known for its sweetness, but for its mystery. You walk past the patch of Skirret to another part of the garden where a different set of withered leaves lie flat against the frosty ground. These are longer and more grass-like. You've been told the root you're looking for is long, straight, and very brittle, so you begin to dig with more care this time. You don't plunge the spade in with force, but use its edge to carefully trench a deep circle around the plant, giving it a wide berth. The ground is still unyieldingly cold, and the work is slow. Your breath plumes in the air, and the muscles in your back begin to complain. Finally, after digging down more than a foot, you gently use the spade as a lever to loosen the deep soil. With a soft sigh, the earth releases its prize. What you pull from the ground looks less like a vegetable and more like a gnarled, forgotten stick that's been buried for a century. It's a long, cylindrical root, maybe a foot in length, but its most striking feature is its skin. It is intensely, deeply black, with a rough, cork-like texture. It looks like a blackened tree root, something you'd toss onto the fire, not put on your plate. This is Scorzonera, or Scorzonera hispanica, a vegetable whose dramatic appearance is matched only by the strange reputation that precedes it. Its common name is viper's grass, and this brings us to a fascinating mainstream historical fact rooted in medieval belief. The name comes from the widespread conviction that this plant was a powerful antidote to the venom of snakes, particularly vipers. The name Scorzonera itself is thought to derive from the Old French word for viper, scorzon. This belief was a classic example of the doctrine of signatures, a theory that held that God had marked plants with a sign or signature to indicate their use. When you cut the Scorzonera root, it exudes a milky white sap. To the medieval mind, this white latex looked like snake venom, and therefore, it must be the cure for it. This wasn't just folk belief. It was promoted by respected botanists of the era. They would instruct people to crush the root and apply it to a snake bite, or drink a concoction made from it, to neutralize the poison. While it likely had no real effect on venom, the belief in its power was absolute. You carry the strange, black roots back to the kitchen, their appearance still more magical than edible. Now you must face the vegetable's second challenge, its preparation. You lay one of the roots on a wooden cutting board and slice off the top. Immediately, a sticky, pure white sap begins to ooze from the cut flesh. This is where you encounter a quirky and rather annoying tidbit about Scorzonera. This latex is incredibly persistent. If it gets on your hands or your clothes, it will dry into a stubborn brown or black stain that is nearly impossible to remove. It's a vegetable that comes with its own built-in ink. The medieval cook had to be clever. You quickly learn to either peel the entire root while holding it under a bucket of cold water to wash the sap away, or to boil the root in its skin first, which makes the black exterior easy to slip off afterward. It's a surprisingly high-maintenance vegetable, a bit of a diva that demands special treatment before it will reveal its true self. You almost need an apron for your apron. Once you've navigated the sticky defenses and peeled away the rough, black skin, the transformation is stunning. Beneath the ugly exterior is a flesh of the purest, most beautiful ivory white. The contrast is remarkable. You have turned a gnarled black stick into a smooth, elegant, and pristine vegetable. It feels like a small act of alchemy. Now, you can cook it. Like skirret, it is versatile. It can be boiled, roasted, or fried. In old recipe books, it's often prepared much like a parsnip, simmered in a stew or baked in a pie. Given its somewhat refined nature, it was often served simply, boiled until tender and then dressed with butter or a simple sauce, allowing its delicate flavor to shine. You decide to boil the slender white roots in a pot over the fire. As they cook, the kitchen fills with a mild, pleasant aroma, with hints of nuts and asparagus. While you wait, you might ponder Scorzonera's other reputation. Its use as an antidote for snake venom was just the beginning of its medicinal career. As it became more widely cultivated in Europe during the later Middle Ages, its list of supposed benefits grew. This is a topic where historians still argue. They debate whether Scorzonera's reputation as a powerful medicinal plant, particularly as a cure for the plague, smallpox, and other fevers, was based on any real efficacy or if it was simply a case of clever marketing by early botanists and apothecaries wanting to promote a new and exotic import from Spain. It was touted as a miracle cure, a general pick-me-up that could ward off melancholy and strengthen the heart. In an age of plagues and uncertainty, a vegetable with such a powerful resume was bound to be popular, whether its claims were true or not. You pull a tender root from the boiling water. It's soft and steaming. You take a bite. The flavor is as surprising as its appearance. It's nothing like the aggressive, earthy taste you might expect from such a rugged-looking root. Instead, it's incredibly mild and delicate, with a gentle sweetness. There's a distinct nutty flavor, like an almond or a hazelnut, and a faint, pleasant aftertaste reminiscent of asparagus or even artichoke hearts. It's sophisticated. While Skirret was a comforting, rustic sweetness, Scorzonera is an elegant, subtle pleasure. It's the kind of vegetable you can imagine being served in a manor house, not just a peasant's hut. Like Skirret, Scorzonera is a true winter treasure. It is incredibly hardy and can be left in the ground throughout the winter, to be dug up as needed. In fact, many gardeners claimed its flavor actually improved after a few good frosts. The roots could also be harvested in the autumn and stored for months in a cool cellar, packed in barrels of sand or dry earth. This made it an incredibly valuable and reliable source of food during the leanest months of the year, from late autumn all the way through to the following spring. It was another form of security, another secret kept by the winter soil. You now have two very different roots rescued from the frozen garden. One is sweet, clustered, and easygoing, a friendly and reliable provider. The other is dark, solitary, and a bit difficult, demanding careful handling before it reveals its refined and elegant heart. Together, they offer a welcome variety to the monotonous winter diet. You feel a sense of security settling over you, the kind that comes from knowing there is food in the pantry, or in this case, in the ground just outside your door. This feeling of security makes you think about the seasons ahead. The long, 40 days of Lent are approaching, a time of fasting and abstinence, when meat, and often all animal products, are forbidden. It is a period of planned scarcity, of spiritual discipline reflected in the diet. For the wealthy, there is always fish. But for many, fresh fish is an expensive luxury. Your mind turns to the stories you've heard from other gardeners and travelers, whispers of another special root. One that is also harvested in the winter, but is particularly prized during Lent. A root that, when cooked, is said to perform a culinary miracle, tasting not of the earth at all, but of the sea. They call it the oyster plant, a vegetable that pretends to be a shellfish, and you decide that will be the next treasure you seek. The memory of the two winter roots, the surprising sweetness of Skirret and the subtle elegance of the black-skinned Scorzonera, gives you a quiet confidence. The earth, even when it seems barren and frozen, is a deep and reliable pantry. Your thoughts, however, are now turning to the rhythm of the coming year. The long, solemn season of Lent is on the horizon, a 40-day spiritual journey marked by fasting and abstinence. For weeks, meat will be off the table, a significant challenge in a diet that relies so heavily on salted pork and preserved meats to get through the winter. Fish is permitted, but for you, living miles from the coast or a great river, it's a rare and costly luxury. But you remember the stories, the whispers you heard at the market and over mugs of ale at the inn. You remember the talk of a Lenten miracle, a vegetable that performs a magical act of culinary deception. Today, you go in search of the oyster plant. You find it growing in a tidy row, its foliage distinct from anything else in the garden. It has long, slender, almost grass-like leaves of a grayish-green color. If you were here in the summer, you would see its most charming feature, which brings us to a delightful quirky tidbit. Salsify produces a beautiful, star-like purple flower that has a peculiar habit. It opens to greet the morning sun, but by midday, it closes its petals tightly, as if its workday is done. This behavior earned it the wonderfully poetic folk name, Jack Go-To Bed at Noon. It's a plant that keeps a schedule, a small, reliable clock in the corner of the garden. But you are here for what lies beneath. You dig carefully, knowing that this root, like Scorzonera, is a long and brittle taproot. When you pull it from the earth, it is, frankly, a bit of an anticlimax. After the strange, clustered limbs of the Skirret and the dramatic, black-skinned Scorzonera, Salsify looks almost comically plain. It's a long, tapering root that looks for all the world like a skinny, anemic parsnip that's forgotten to wash. Its skin is a pale, creamy beige, stained with dirt. There's nothing about its appearance that suggests magic. It looks humble, ordinary, and entirely of the earth. Yet this unassuming root was a star of the medieval and Renaissance garden, and its rise to fame is directly tied to the religious calendar. This is a mainstream historical fact. Salsify was widely cultivated in monastery gardens all across Europe, from Italy to England. Monks, who were often skilled horticulturalists, prized this vegetable specifically for its use during Lent and on other fast days, like Fridays, when the consumption of meat from four-legged animals was forbidden by the Church. Monastic records and early herbals, like those written by the great 13th-century scholar Albertus Magnus, contain detailed instructions for its cultivation. For the monks, and for the devout populace, Salsify wasn't just another vegetable. It was a gift, a clever and delicious way to adhere to God's law without sacrificing savory flavor. You take your plain-looking roots back to the kitchen. As you begin to prepare them, you realize that while it may look different from its black-skinned cousin, it shares some of the same difficult habits. When you cut the root, the same sticky, milky latex seeps out. And you notice something else. The pure white flesh, once exposed to the air, begins to discolor almost immediately, turning a sad brownish yellow. You learn quickly that the key is to have a bowl of acidulated water ready, a simple mix of water and a splash of vinegar or sharp verjuice. As you peel each root, you immediately plunge it into the water, which keeps its flesh pristine and white. It's another vegetable that requires a bit of know-how. It's not content to be simply chopped and thrown in a pot. It demands a preparatory spa day in a vinegar bath before it will cooperate. Now, with a bowl of gleaming white roots ready, you can finally put its reputation to the test. The oyster flavor, they say, is most pronounced when the root is cooked in a way that highlights its delicate, savory side. The most common preparation was to boil it until tender and then serve it in a creamy sauce, or to mash it into a thick, savory pottage. You decide on a simple boil. As the roots simmer in the pot over the hearth, the air fills with a strange and unexpected aroma. It isn't the sweet, earthy smell of other root vegetables. It's something else, something faintly briny and savory, a scent that speaks not of the garden, but of the sea. This is where we encounter a fascinating scholarly debate. Historians and food scientists still argue about the precise chemical compound responsible for Salsify's oyster-like flavor. While some attribute it to a specific combination of minerals absorbed from the soil that mimic the taste of shellfish, others believe it's a powerful perceptual trick. They suggest that the vegetable's slightly salty, briny notes, combined with its soft, creamy texture when cooked, creates a powerful flavor illusion in the mind of a diner who is desperately missing meat and longing for a savory treat during the long fast of Lent. Was it real chemistry, or was it the power of suggestion and a whole lot of wishful thinking? In a way, it doesn't matter. The experience was real for those who ate it. You lift a piece of the cooked salsify from the pot. It's tender and steaming. You take your first, hesitant bite. And then your eyes widen. The stories are true. The magic is real. The flavor is uncanny. It doesn't just vaguely remind you of seafood. It has the distinct, unmistakable taste of a cooked oyster. It's savory, slightly salty, with a deep umami quality and a faint, sweet brininess that is utterly baffling. You are eating a root that you dug from the frozen dirt, yet your senses are telling you that you are eating something that was pulled from the ocean. It's a culinary miracle, a delightful paradox that makes you laugh out loud. Getting your seafood fresh from the garden patch is a pretty good trick. You can now imagine the joy this vegetable would bring during the lean days of Lent. After weeks of flavorless pottages and dry bread, a dish of salsify would feel like the most decadent feast imaginable. It was a loophole in the laws of fasting, a way to delight the palate while still saving the soul. Its popularity is suddenly no mystery. Of course, it was also cooked in other ways. Like its cousins, it was delicious roasted, which brought out more of its natural sweetness, or mashed and fried into savory cakes or fritters. But its true calling, its claim to fame, was always its remarkable ability to masquerade as an oyster. You finish your meal, marveling at the strange and wonderful plant. The winter garden has provided you with sweetness, with elegance, and now, with illusion. You feel like a magician, having conjured the taste of the distant sea from a patch of cold, inland soil. You are ready for Lent now. Let the days of fasting come. You have a secret weapon waiting in the earth. This sense of successful preparation, of having wrung magic and sustenance from the hard winter ground, fills you with a deep satisfaction. The cycle of the year is beginning to turn. The days, though still cold, are growing imperceptibly longer. The iron grip of winter is weakening. Your thoughts turn from the treasures hidden below the ground to the first signs of life that will soon appear above it. You begin to long for the taste of green things, for the crisp bite of a fresh leaf and the tender snap of a young shoot. Your mind drifts to the promise of spring and the very first plants that will bravely push their way through the thawing soil, harbingers of the abundance to come. The magical taste of the oyster plant still lingers in your memory, a testament to the winter garden's strange and wonderful secrets. But now, something in the air has shifted. A subtle warmth has begun to creep into the afternoon sun. The days are noticeably longer, and the iron-hard ground has finally started to soften. The frost still comes at night, but it is a weaker, more transient thing. It is the time of the thaw, a period of muddy, messy, and glorious transition. Your diet of stored roots and dried grains, which has sustained you through the cold months, is beginning to feel heavy and monotonous. You find yourself craving something fresh, something green, something that tastes of life and renewal. You walk out into your garden, your eyes scanning the damp earth not for what lies beneath, but for what is about to rise above. And then you see it. Pushing bravely through the cold mud is a cluster of thick, green-purple shoots, tightly furled like tiny spears. This is the moment you've been waiting for, the true harbinger of spring. You have found the first offering of good King Henry. You kneel down and gently snap off a few of the tender shoots at their base. They are no thicker than your little finger, and they feel cool and succulent to the touch. This is the plant's first gift of the year, and arguably its most delicious. You take them back to the kitchen, rinse them in cool water, and prepare them simply. You tie the small bundle of shoots together with a piece of twine and drop them into a pot of boiling water for just a few minutes, until they are tender. You lift them out, steaming and vibrant green, and dress them with a little melted butter or lard and a pinch of salt. You take your first bite. The flavor is exquisite. It's a perfect blend of asparagus and a mild, earthy greenness, with a pleasant, slightly bitter note that tastes clean and vital. After a long winter of starchy, sweet roots, this fresh, green flavor is a jolt to the senses. It tastes like the end of scarcity. It tastes like hope. This remarkable plant, whose botanical name is Blidum bonus henricus, is a true lost treasure of the medieval garden. Today it's almost completely unknown, but for centuries it was a cherished and essential staple. It is the ultimate multi-tool vegetable, a triple-duty plant that offers 3 different types of food from a single patch of ground. You have just eaten the first part, the early spring shoots, known to all as poor man's asparagus. As the spring progresses and the weather warms, the plant you harvested from continues to grow. It sends up tall stalks and unfurls its leaves. The leaves are large and triangular, shaped like an arrowhead, with a slightly powdery, gray-green surface. This is the plant's second gift. Throughout the late spring and early summer, you can harvest these leaves and use them exactly as you would use spinach. You can wilt them in a pan, chop them into stuffings, or, most commonly, add them by the handful to your daily pottage to enrich it with flavor and nutrients. And this nutritional boost was incredibly important. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact about medieval health. After a long winter with no fresh fruit and very few fresh vegetables, people were often suffering from vitamin deficiencies by the time spring arrived. Scurvy, a debilitating disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, was rampant, leading to weakness, bleeding gums, and eventually death. A plant like Good King Henry, whose leaves are packed with vitamin C, as well as iron and vitamin A, was not just food, it was medicine. It was one of nature's primary cures for the ailments of winter. But the king isn't done giving yet. As summer approaches, the plant begins to produce its flowers. Before the tiny, insignificant greenish flowers open, they form dense clusters of buds at the top of the stalks. This is the third and final gift. You can snap off these tender flower heads and cook them just like you would broccoli or cauliflower florets. They are a delicate treat with a mild, nutty flavor. To get your asparagus, your spinach, and your broccoli all from a single, low-maintenance perennial plant is the kind of efficiency that modern gardeners can only dream of. It's the ultimate medieval meal prep hack. The plant's name itself is a wonderful historical mystery, which is a quirky tidbit all on its own. No one knows for certain why it's called Good King Henry. One theory links it to King Henry IV of France, who was known as Le Bon Roi Henri, and was a champion of the common people, famously wishing that every peasant could have a chicken in his pot on Sunday. Another theory ties it to various English King Henrys, including the infamous Henry VIII, for reasons that are now obscure. But the most likely and charming explanation is that the name is a corruption of the German Guter Heinrich, or Good Henry. In German folklore, Good Henry was the name given to a helpful goblin or household sprite, a friendly spirit who brought good fortune. The name suggests that the plant was seen in the same way, as a reliable, helpful, and almost magical friend to have in the garden. It's certainly a lot nicer than having a vegetable named after a grumpy household goblin. Good King Henry has a wild, weedy look to it, and for good reason. It's a close relative of common weeds like lamb's quarters or fat hen, a plant we'll meet later. This connection is the subject of a scholarly debate. Historians and botanists still argue about the exact point when Good King Henry transitioned from a foraged wild plant to a deliberately cultivated garden staple. While its wild ancestors were gathered from the wild for millennia, pinpointing when gardeners began specifically selecting and planting this perennial variety is difficult, as the line between a managed wild patch and a formal garden was often blurry in medieval times. Was it a weed that was invited into the garden, or a garden plant that never forgot its wild origins? The answer is likely somewhere in between. This wild resilience is what made it so valuable. It's a hardy perennial that, once established, will come back year after year with almost no effort. It thrives in poor soil and happily seeds itself around the garden. Like the skirret, it is a plant of security and self-sufficiency. So why did such a useful and generous plant fall out of favor? It likely suffered the same fate as skirret. It required too much knowledge. You had to know when to harvest the shoots, when to switch to the leaves, and when to take the buds. As agriculture became more commercialized, plants that produced a single, uniform, easy-to-harvest crop, like modern spinach, were favored over these versatile, but more complex, old-timers. The king was quietly dethroned by simpler subjects. You stand in your garden, now bathed in the stronger light of a late spring afternoon. The patch of Good King Henry is lush and green, its arrow-shaped leaves pointing to the sky. You've enjoyed its asparagus-like shoots, and now you're harvesting its leaves for tonight's pottage. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for this generous, triple-duty plant that asks for so little and gives so much. It is a true and loyal friend. The success of this cultivated green makes you think. Good King Henry is a garden aristocrat, a plant deliberately grown for its leaves. But its very nature, so close to that of a common weed, reminds you of the value of humble foliage. You glance over at another part of your garden, at the turnip patch. The plants are thriving, their large, lush green leaves forming a dense canopy. You, like everyone else, have been growing them for the promise of the round, purple-shouldered root that is swelling in the earth beneath. But as you look at that vibrant sea of green, you begin to wonder. In a world where every part of a plant is a potential resource, surely those leaves were not always ignored. You stand in your garden, the fresh, green taste of Good King Henry still a pleasant memory on your tongue. The success of that versatile plant has shifted your perspective. You're no longer just looking at your garden as a collection of individual crops, but as an ecosystem of possibilities, where every leaf, stem, and root has a potential purpose. Your gaze drifts over to the turnip patch. The plants are flourishing in the strengthening spring sun, their leaves large, lush, and a deep, vibrant green. For weeks, you've been tending them with a single goal in mind: the round, satisfying root that is forming in the dark soil below. But now, you see them differently. You see a second harvest, one that is hiding in plain sight. You walk over to the patch and kneel down. The turnip leaves are broad and have a slightly coarse, almost fuzzy texture, a bit like a hardy cabbage leaf. You select one of the younger, more tender leaves from the center of the plant and pluck it. You know that by harvesting them this way, a few leaves from each plant, a practice known as cut and come again, you can get a steady supply of greens without harming the development of the root that you'll dig up in the autumn. It's the ultimate 2-for-1 deal, a piece of agricultural wisdom that was essential for survival in the medieval world. Today, we think of the turnip as a humble, and perhaps slightly boring, root vegetable. But for much of history, its leaves were just as important, if not more so. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The turnip, Brassica rapa, and its close relatives were among the most important staple crops in Europe for millennia, precisely because they were a dual-output plant. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century, praised not only the root but also the delicious and nutritious leaves. In the medieval period, turnip greens were one of the first and most reliable cultivated green vegetables to become available in the spring, providing a desperate population with essential vitamins after a long and barren winter. The root was for later. The greens were for now. You gather a healthy bunch of the young leaves and take them back to the kitchen. You wash them carefully, the cool water bringing out their deep green color. They smell peppery and fresh, like a cross between a cabbage and a radish. In a medieval kitchen, there's only one destination for a tough green like this, the pottage pot. Raw salads were rare and often viewed with suspicion, as uncooked vegetables were thought to cause digestive ailments and imbalances in the humors. The safest and most common way to eat your greens was to cook them thoroughly. You chop the turnip leaves roughly and drop them into the simmering cauldron, perhaps along with a precious sliver of salted bacon fat to add flavor and richness. You let them simmer for a long time, until their tough fibers break down and they become meltingly tender. When you finally ladle a portion into your bowl, the greens have cooked down into a silky, dark green mass, mingling with the grains and other vegetables in the stew. You take a spoonful. The flavor is robust and deeply savory. It has the peppery bite of a mustard green, but the long cooking has mellowed it into a pleasant, earthy bitterness, perfectly balanced by the smoky richness of the bacon fat. It's not a delicate flavor, but it's incredibly satisfying and feels profoundly nourishing. The greens are nutritional powerhouses, packed with vitamins A, C, and K, as well as minerals like calcium. It's the original buy one, get one free deal. But instead of another root, you get a huge boost of life-saving nutrients. The humble turnip often gets a bad reputation, and this is the subject of a scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the social status of the turnip. While many historical accounts and literary sources portray it as a lowly peasant food, a symbol of poverty to be eaten only in times of desperation, other sources complicate this picture. Royal household accounts from the period list purchases of turnips, and early cookbooks contain recipes for preparing both the roots and the young greens in ways that suggest they were eaten by the wealthy. Its status was likely more fluid, dependent not on the vegetable itself, but on how it was prepared. boiled plainly for a peasant's pottage, or perhaps braised with expensive spices and served at a nobleman's table. But the turnip's role in culture goes far beyond the dinner table. In one of history's most charming and quirky tidbits, the turnip has a secret identity as the original jack-o'-lantern. Long before pumpkins were introduced to Europe from the Americas, people in Ireland and Scotland celebrated the festival of Samhain, the ancient Celtic precursor to Halloween. On this night, it was believed that the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. To ward off evil spirits, people would take large turnips or rutabagas, hollow them out, and carve grotesque faces into their sides. A lit piece of coal or a candle was placed inside, and these spooky, glowing heads would be placed in windows or carried about to frighten away malevolent ghosts. It's a wonderful image, a whole landscape of glowing, grinning turnips long before the pumpkin got all the spooky glory. So why did we forget about eating turnip greens? As agriculture became more specialized and commercial, turnips began to be bred for specific traits. Farmers selected for larger, rounder, smoother roots that were easier to harvest and transport. The quality of the leaves became an afterthought. Eventually, other, more tender greens, like spinach and chard, became easier to cultivate and more fashionable to eat. The once prized turnip greens were slowly demoted, eventually becoming seen as something fit only for animal fodder, a sad fate for such a nutritious and historically important food. You finish your bowl of pottage, feeling the hearty strength of the greens. You have a newfound respect for the turnip, no longer seeing it as a simple, boring root, but as a clever, generous plant that offers sustenance throughout the year. Your garden is truly coming alive now. The early shoots of good King Henry and the tender leaves of the turnip are providing a steady supply of fresh, vital food. The hardship of winter is beginning to feel like a distant memory. The reliable, year-after-year generosity of a plant like the turnip makes you think of another strange and steadfast resident of your garden. Over in the corner is a dense, spiky clump of green shoots that you've been snipping from all winter. They look like spring onions, taste a bit like them too, but they never form a proper bulb and they just keep regrowing, no matter how often you cut them. You've heard it called a Welsh onion, but you've also heard that it's not really an onion, and that it has nothing at all to do with Wales. You look at this reliable, ever-giving impostor and wonder about its story. Your newfound appreciation for the humble turnip green, that overlooked star of the vegetable patch, has you thinking about the quiet generosity of your garden. It's a place of perennials and biennials, of plants that give and give again. This thought leads you to the far corner of your herb bed, to a plant that is the very definition of reliable. All winter long, even when the ground was frozen solid, this plant has offered up spiky, hollow green shoots. You've snipped them for months to add a welcome sharpness to your meals. They look like spring onions, they smell like spring onions, but you know they are something else entirely. You are standing before the great pretender of the medieval garden, the Welsh onion. You reach down and snip a handful of the green shoots close to the base. They are crisp and fragrant, releasing a fresh, mild oniony scent into the cool spring air. You know that in a few days, new shoots will have already grown back to replace the ones you've taken. This plant is a small, green miracle of perpetual regeneration. But its name is a complete puzzle. You know you are in England, or perhaps France, and this plant seems perfectly at home here. So why is it called a Welsh onion? And more confusingly, why is it called an onion at all, when it never forms a proper bulb? The answer to the first question is a fantastic quirky tidbit of linguistic history that has nothing to do with the country of Wales. The name is a fossil, a word preserved in time that has lost its original meaning. The Welsh in Welsh onion likely comes from the very old Germanic word Welsh, which simply meant foreign. It was a catch-all term for things that came from somewhere else, particularly from the Roman or Celtic world. The Anglo-Saxons, for example, called the native Britons the Welas, or foreigners, which is where the name Wales comes from. So, when this strange, non-bulbing onion appeared in European gardens, it was simply called the foreign onion. The poor Welsh just happened to get stuck with the credit, or the blame, depending on how you feel about onions. And where did this foreigner come from? This brings us to a mainstream historical fact about its true origins. The Welsh onion, or Allium fistulosum, is not native to Europe at all. Its home is in China and Siberia, where it has been cultivated for thousands of years, a cornerstone of Asian cuisine long before it ever found its way into a European pottage. It most likely traveled west along the Silk Road and other trade routes, a slow migration of flavor that took centuries, arriving in Europe sometime in the early Middle Ages. This distant origin is the source of a lingering scholarly debate. Historians and archaeobotanists still argue about the exact route and timing of the Welsh onion's arrival in Western Europe. While some point to Roman-era introductions of similar alliums, others argue that its widespread cultivation began later, possibly spreading from Eastern Europe along Viking or Slavic trade routes, with its foreign name reflecting this more recent, non-Roman origin. Was it a long-lost Roman import, or a newer, more exotic arrival from the mysterious East? The records are too sparse to say for sure. What is certain is that once it arrived, medieval gardeners instantly recognized its value. And its greatest value lay in the fact that it was, as you've noted, a fake onion. A true bulbing onion, the kind we know today, is a one-time deal. You plant a seed, it grows into a bulb, you harvest it, and the plant is gone. It is an annual withdrawal from the soil bank. But the Welsh onion is a perennial. It doesn't put its energy into forming a single, large bulb. Instead, it forms a dense, expanding clump, continuously sending up new green shoots. It is a regenerating investment. You can harvest from it all year round, snipping the greens in spring and summer, digging up a few of the tender, leek-like stems in autumn, and even brushing away the snow to find green shoots in the dead of winter. It's the sourdough starter of the allium family. As long as you leave a piece in the ground, you can keep it going forever. You take your handful of greens back to the kitchen. Their culinary use is straightforward and versatile. You chop them finely, both the green, hollow tops and the tender, white bases. The pieces fall onto your wooden board, a beautiful mosaic of bright green and clean white, releasing that sharp, invigorating scent. You toss them into your simmering pottage, where they will instantly brighten the flavor, cutting through the richness of the grains and adding a much-needed fresh, savory note. They could also be mixed into stuffings for the occasional roasted chicken, baked into savory breads, or sprinkled over eggs. In a world where fresh flavors were a seasonal luxury, the Welsh onion provided a year-round supply of zesty, oniony goodness. It was the reliable background note that made the whole song of medieval cooking sound better. You eat your freshly seasoned pottage, and the bright flavor is a welcome kick. It's a taste you can count on, a taste that's there for you in the bleakest days of February as well as the most abundant days of June. You have a deep appreciation for this humble pretender. It may not be a real onion, and it may not be from Wales, but its honesty lies in its resilience. It is exactly what it appears to be, a simple, hard-working, and incredibly generous plant. It's a quiet reminder that sometimes the most valuable things are not the rarest or the most dramatic, but the ones that are simply always there when you need them. You look out your window at the garden, now a place of managed and reliable abundance. You have your perennial King Henry, your 2-for-1 turnips, and your ever-giving Welsh onions. You're starting to feel like a savvy and well-provided-for gardener. But this very sense of cultivated security makes you curious. These are the plants you tend to, the ones you protect behind your wattle fence. But what about the world beyond that fence? What about the wild plants, the so-called weeds, that you see growing in the hedgerows and fallow fields? You've heard the old women in the village speak of them, of free food that is just as nutritious, if not more so, than the crops you work so hard to grow. Your thoughts turn to the art of foraging, and to one plant in particular, a common weed so valuable that it was known to save entire villages during times of famine. Your garden is a place of reassuring order. The Welsh onions stand in their neat clump, the turnip leaves are lush and ready for thinning, and you know exactly where the good King Henry will rise each spring. It is a world you can manage, a partnership of soil and season that you help to conduct. But the thought of the untamed world beyond your fence, a world that asks for no tending and yet still provides, has taken root in your mind. You take a wicker basket, step outside the low wattle fence of your garden, and enter the wild pantry. You don't have to walk far. In the fallow field next to your garden, where the earth was plowed last autumn but left unplanted, a familiar plant is growing in thick, vigorous patches. Most people would call it a weed. To you, it is a treasure. You are looking at Fat Hen, or Chenopodium album. It's an upright plant, with leaves shaped vaguely like a diamond or the print of a goose's foot, which is why it's also called white goosefoot. Its most distinctive feature is a fine, mealy white powder that dusts the youngest leaves and the underside of the older ones. It looks as though a baker has carelessly shaken flour over the whole patch. You begin to gather the tender young leaves and the top few inches of the stems, leaving the tougher, older parts of the plant behind. The powdery coating comes off on your fingers, a strange, waxy dust. This unassuming weed is, in fact, one of the great superfoods of the medieval world, a plant so nutritious that it puts modern kale and spinach to shame. It is incredibly rich in protein for a leafy green, and it is packed with vitamin A, iron, and more calcium than almost any other vegetable. It's the original, non-GMO, organic, free-range superfood, and you don't need to pay a premium for it at a fancy market. You just need to know what you're looking for. This plant isn't just some desperate famine food, either. It has been a core part of the human diet for an astonishingly long time. This is a well-established mainstream fact. Archaeologists have found the seeds of fat hen in the preserved stomachs of Iron Age bog bodies, like the famous Toland man from Denmark. Its seeds have also been found by the thousand at Neolithic settlement sites across Europe. This tells us that for thousands of years, long before the Romans brought cabbage and peas, people were gathering and eating fat hen not as an emergency backup, but as a staple food. It is one of humanity's oldest and most successful companions. This long history has led to a fascinating scholarly debate. Historians and archaeobotanists still argue about the extent to which fat hen was a proto-domesticated plant in the early Middle Ages. While it clearly grows wild and thrives in disturbed soil, some evidence suggests that people would actively manage it. They might encourage patches of it to grow near their homes, clear other weeds from around it, and intentionally leave fields fallow just to ensure a healthy crop of this valuable plant. The line between foraging and farming was often blurry, and fat hen existed in that gray area, a wild plant that was so useful, it was given a helping hand. You soon have your basket full of the tender green tops. You carry them back to your kitchen, a satisfying weight on your arm. This is the very definition of a pother, which brings us to a quirky linguistic tidbit. The now archaic word, pother, was the common term for any leafy plant that was cooked in the pot, which almost always meant the great communal pottage cauldron that simmered over the fire. Fat hen was so common, so widely used, and so essential to the daily pottage, that in many parts of medieval Europe, it was the quintessential pother. It was the default green, the reliable bulk, the nutritious foundation of the daily meal. Like turnip greens, the leaves are best cooked. You wash the dusty powder from them and chop them roughly before adding them to your pottage. They cook down quickly, losing their volume and turning a deep, satisfying green. When you eat the stew, the flavor of the fat hen is mild and pleasant. It tastes very much like its modern cousin, spinach, but perhaps with a richer, earthier undertone. It has no bitterness at all, just a clean, green flavor that complements the grains and roots in the pot perfectly. But its leaves are not the only gift. If you were to let the plants grow all season, they would produce thousands of tiny, black, shiny seeds. In a good year, you would ignore them. But in a bad year, when the wheat was struck by blight or the oats failed to grow, these seeds were a lifesaver. People would harvest the fat hen seeds by the basketful, dry them, and grind them into a dark, heavy flour. This flour could be used to make a dense, black bread or a hearty gruel. It was known as famine bread, and while it was not as pleasant as a fine wheat loaf, it was packed with protein and calories, and it kept countless communities from starvation. You feel a profound sense of empowerment. Your meal tonight is not just delicious, it was free. It came not from your own hard labor of plowing and sowing, but from the simple act of knowing what to look for, a gift from the untended earth. You have a new respect for the plants you once dismissed as mere weeds. You understand now that the wild pantry is just as important as the cultivated garden, a resilient backup system in a world where nothing is certain. It's a good feeling to know that even if your own crops should fail, the fat hen will likely still be there, growing abundantly in the margins, waiting to help. As you are out gathering the goosefoot, you notice another, much smaller plant growing everywhere, forming a low, dense mat over any patch of bare soil. It has delicate, sprawling stems and tiny, paired leaves, with even tinier white flowers that look like little stars. It's a plant you've seen 1,000 times and never given a second thought. It seems too small, too fragile to be of any use. But you remember hearing the village wise woman say that this little plant holds its own powerful secret, not one of protein or calcium, but a different kind of magic, a vital nutrient that is especially precious after the long, dark winter. You feel a quiet satisfaction from your successful foraging. The basket full of fat hen is a testament to the wild earth's generosity, a free and nourishing meal that asked for nothing but the effort of gathering. As you stand, ready to head back, your eyes are drawn to the ground at your feet. Carpeting the earth in a low, sprawling mat is the other plant you noticed earlier, the one with the tiny, star-like flowers. You had dismissed it as too small and insignificant to be of any use, but the village healer's words echo in your mind. Sometimes the smallest plants hold the biggest secrets. You crouch down for a closer look. This is chickweed, or Stellaria media. It's a delicate-looking plant, with weak, sprawling stems and small, oval leaves that grow in opposite pairs along the stem. Its most charming feature is its flower. Each tiny white flower appears to have 10 slender petals, but if you look very closely, you'll see it's actually 5 petals, each one split so deeply down the middle that it looks like 2. This gives the flower its distinctive, star-like appearance, which is where its Latin name, Stellaria, comes from. It seems fragile, almost inconsequential, yet this humble little plant is the peasant's secret vitamin stash. Its great secret is vitamin C. While you can't see it or taste it, this tiny plant is one of the most potent sources of this essential nutrient in the entire medieval landscape. In an era before citrus fruits were available, and after a long winter with no fresh greens, this little weed was a powerhouse protector against the dreaded disease of scurvy. While the rich might have access to imported rarities, for the common person, a handful of fresh chickweed was a readily available dose of life-saving medicine. It was the original convenience store of the foraging world, always open and stocked with exactly what you needed. What makes chickweed so incredibly valuable is not just its nutritional content, but its sheer resilience and year-round availability. It's an annual, but it has a phenomenally fast life cycle. It can go from seed to producing its own seeds in as little as 5 or 6 weeks. This means it can produce multiple generations in a single year, and you can find it growing fresh and green at almost any time. It thrives in the cool, damp weather of spring and autumn. It will happily grow through a mild winter, and you can often find it green and vibrant by brushing away a layer of snow. It is the first green to appear in the spring and one of the last to disappear in the winter. It is always there. This reliable presence made it a cornerstone of folk medicine for centuries. This is a well-established mainstream fact. Its use as both food and a medicinal herb is ancient, documented in classical Greek texts by the physician Dioscorides and later in medieval Anglo-Saxon guides like the famous Leech Book of Bald. It was primarily known as a cooling herb, a concept central to the theory of the humors. It was used to make poultices to soothe rashes, burns, and itchy skin conditions. A tea made from its leaves was drunk to help reduce fevers. Its reputation as a gentle but effective healer was known throughout Europe. But chickweed had another, more whimsical use, which is a delightful quirky tidbit of plant lore. It was known as the poor man's weatherglass. The plant is remarkably sensitive to atmospheric changes. In fine, sunny weather, its tiny, star-like flowers and its leaves will open wide. But when rain is approaching, the leaves fold up over the tender buds and the flowers close, as if tucking themselves in to stay dry. A savvy peasant could predict the day's weather simply by looking at the posture of the chickweed patch by their door. It was a small, magical, and surprisingly reliable barometer. This deep, practical knowledge of wild plants raises a question that historians and folklorists still argue about. They debate the extent to which the knowledge of wild medicinal herbs like chickweed was universally held by the peasantry versus being the specialized domain of cunning folk or village healers. Was every peasant mother a skilled herbalist out of necessity, able to treat her family's ailments with plants from the hedgerow? Or did they rely on a local expert when illness struck, suggesting a more structured, if informal, system of health care? The truth is likely a mix of both, with some basic knowledge being widespread, while the more complex remedies were left to the specialists. You decide to gather some. Unlike the patient harvesting of leaves from the fat hen, gathering chickweed is quick and easy. You can simply take a knife and shear off handfuls of the tender green tops, or just pinch them off with your fingers. Your basket is full in no time. You wonder for a moment about its name. It's a simple one. Chickens and other small wild birds adore it, and will happily devour any patch they can find. Following the dietary advice of chickens seems like a pretty safe bet. Back in the kitchen, you find that chickweed is as versatile as it is abundant. Because it's so tender, it's one of the few wild greens that can be eaten raw, a welcome treat after a winter of endlessly boiled foods. You chew on a fresh stem. The taste is wonderfully mild and refreshing. It tastes of green things growing, like young corn silk or the most delicate lettuce, with a crisp texture that's full of water. It's the perfect addition to a simple salad if you were so inclined, though you're more likely to use it in your pottage. You chop a large handful and stir it into the pot just at the end of cooking, so it barely wilts, retaining its fresh flavor and most of its vitamins. You eat your meal, enriched now with 2 different foraged greens. The fat hen provides the earthy, nutritious bulk, while the chickweed adds a final burst of fresh, vibrant, vitamin-packed flavor. You feel invigorated, your body humming with the green energy of the awakening land. You've now added 2 powerful allies to your culinary arsenal, both of them free, abundant, and growing just beyond your garden gate. Your understanding of the world around you is expanding. You no longer see just fields and hedgerows. You see a landscape full of resources, a wild pantry brimming with food and medicine. Your forager's eye is becoming sharper. As you walked back from the field, you noticed other plants, ones you've seen before but never truly registered. Along the damp ditch that marks the edge of the path, a tall, robust plant is growing, its shiny, dark green leaves looking a bit like a wild, untamed version of celery. Its presence is bold, almost aggressive, as if it's an outlaw from the neat and tidy world of the garden. You've heard it has a powerful flavor, a plant that straddles the line between a cultivated herb and a wild weed, and you decide it will be the next one you get to know. Your journey into the wild pantry has been a quiet revelation. The earth beyond your garden fence, which you once saw as just a tangle of anonymous greenery, is now revealing itself to be a landscape of opportunities. You've learned to see the nutritious power of the common fat hen and the secret vitamin store of the humble chickweed. Your forager's eye is becoming attuned to the subtle clues of the landscape, and it's this new awareness that draws you to a plant you've seen 1,000 times but never truly noticed. It's growing in a thick, confident clump in the damp soil of a hedgerow, a place where the wild world and the managed world meet. You approach the plant. It is a robust and handsome thing, standing a good 3 feet tall. Its stems are thick and ridged, and its leaves are a glossy, deep green, divided into toothed leaflets that look remarkably like a larger, more ambitious version of celery or parsley. This is Alexander's, or Smyrnium olusatrum, the ambitious outlaw of the hedgerow. It's a plant that feels like it doesn't quite belong. It has the swagger of a garden vegetable but the untamed spirit of a wild herb. And in a way, you're right. It is a plant with a past, a living ghost from a fallen empire. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact that makes this plant so fascinating. Alexander's is not native to Britain. It was an import, a culinary souvenir brought to these shores nearly 1,000 years before your time by the Roman legions. The Romans cultivated it in their extensive villa gardens, prizing it as a potherb and using it much as they would celery. When the Roman Empire collapsed and its legions withdrew, their villas and gardens fell into ruin. But Alexander's, a hardy and adaptable plant, did not die out. It escaped. It leapt over the crumbling garden walls and found a new home in the wild, naturalizing along the coastlines, riverbanks, and the old Roman roads. To find and eat a patch of Alexander's is to engage in a form of culinary archaeology. You are tasting a living relic, a flavor that has haunted the landscape for over 1,000 years. The plant's generosity is legendary. It is one of those remarkable plants where almost every single part is edible, each with its own distinct use and flavor. In the early spring, you would harvest the tender young shoots and stems. After peeling away the stringy outer layer, they could be steamed or boiled and eaten like asparagus, offering a powerful, aromatic kick to the spring diet. Later in the season, the large, glossy leaves are used as a flavoring herb, a more pungent alternative to parsley, chopped and added to potages, stews, and sauces to give them a deep, celery-like warmth. Even the flower buds are a delicacy. Before the great, plate-sized umbels of tiny, yellow-green flowers open, the clusters of buds can be harvested. They have a pungent, slightly spicy flavor and were often pickled in vinegar and used like capers are today, a zesty, aromatic garnish. The large, black taproot is also edible, though it has a very strong and peppery flavor that some find overwhelming. And finally, when the flowers fade, they produce small, black, ridged seeds. These seeds, when dried, could be ground and used as a spice, a homegrown substitute for expensive black pepper. It is a plant that gives and gives, a complete culinary toolkit hiding in the hedgerow. It's a bit like celery's loud, boisterous cousin, the one who shows up to the party uninvited but brings all the best snacks. Like many early greens, this brings us to a quirky tidbit about its seasonal importance. Alexander's was particularly valued as a Lenten herb. Because it is one of the first large, leafy greens to appear at the end of winter, often as early as February, it provided a much-needed burst of strong, fresh flavor for the often bland and monotonous dishes of the Lenten fast. A handful of chopped Alexander's leaves could transform a simple fish stew or a dull bean pottage into something vibrant and aromatic. It was the forager's answer to the challenge of meatless cooking. The incredible success of this Roman escapee is the subject of a scholarly debate. Historians and botanists still debate how Alexanders managed to thrive so successfully as an escapee for over 1,000 years. Was its success purely due to its hardy nature and lack of natural predators in its new environment? Or did medieval people continue to semi-cultivate it, intentionally transplanting it from the wild into their gardens, or scattering its seeds near their homes? It's possible that this wild plant was actively managed for centuries, a cherished Roman relic that was helped along by gardeners who valued its powerful flavor and year-round utility. You decide to harvest some of the young stems, cutting them near the base. They are hollow and crisp. You take them back to the kitchen, the powerful, aromatic scent clinging to your hands. The smell is intense, a concentrated blast of celery and parsley, but with something else mixed in, a unique, almost spicy, myrrh-like fragrance. This bold flavor is the very reason for both its rise and its fall. For centuries, it was the primary celery-like flavoring in the European kitchen. But in the 17th and 18th centuries, Italian gardeners began to develop modern celery, a plant with a much milder, crisper, and more refined flavor. Next to this new, elegant vegetable, the wild, aggressive taste of Alexander's began to seem coarse and old-fashioned. The ambitious outlaw was eventually tamed and replaced by its more polite, domesticated cousin. You peel a stem and take a cautious bite. The flavor explodes in your mouth. It is powerfully green, intensely aromatic, and has a pleasant bitterness that is both refreshing and startling. You can understand why a little of this would go a long way in a pottage. You chop the stems and add them to your cooking, and the whole kitchen fills with their unique, pungent perfume. The taste is a taste of the past, a wilder, less subtle, and perhaps more honest flavor than the refined vegetables you are used to. You have now added a new category of plant to your mental pantry. Not just the cultivated roots of winter, or the gentle foraged greens, but this, a bold and pungent flavoring herb, a living piece of history that connects your simple meal back to the legions of Rome. You feel a new layer of connection to the land and its long, complicated story. This powerful, almost overwhelming aromatic experience makes you think of the other great flavoring plants you know, the ones that are not wild but are carefully tended in your own herb garden. One plant in particular comes to mind, an herb so potent, so all-encompassing in its flavor, that it makes even the aggressive taste of Alexander's seem gentle and shy by comparison. The wild, pungent flavor of the Alexanders still echoes on your palate. It was a taste of history, a bold, untamed flavor that connects you directly to the Roman past of this land. That experience with such a powerful foraged herb has sharpened your senses and made you think about the other great flavoring plants in your world, the ones that are not wild escapees but are deliberately cultivated titans of the garden. You walk back towards the house, past the vegetable beds, and into the small, walled herb garden, a place of intense and wonderful smells. One plant in particular dominates the space, not just with its scent, but with its sheer size. You are standing before Lovage, or Levisticum officinale. This is not a demure little herb. It is a giant, a towering perennial that can easily grow taller than you are. In the height of summer, it is a magnificent architectural plant, a great, lush fountain of green. Its leaves are large, glossy, and dark, shaped like a cross between celery and flat-leaf parsley, and its thick, hollow stems are as sturdy as bamboo. But its most defining feature is its aroma. As you brush past a leaf, the air around you is instantly saturated with a scent so powerful it's almost overwhelming. It smells like celery, yes, but a celery that has been training for a fight. It's celery with superpowers, 10 times stronger, deeper, and more complex, with added notes of parsley, anise, and a strange, savory, almost meaty quality. Like Alexander's, Lovage is an ancient plant with a noble history. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact that underscores its importance. Lovage was a beloved herb of the Romans. It is mentioned frequently in Apicius, the famous collection of Roman recipes from the 4th or 5th century, where it was used to flavor everything from chicken to seafood sauces. The Romans, with their love of bold flavors, carried it with them across their empire. And when the empire fell, it was the monks who became the custodians of this powerful herb, carefully cultivating it in their monastery gardens. From these monastic centers, it spread throughout Europe, becoming an absolutely essential and standard feature of every medieval kitchen garden for the next 1,000 years. The reason for its popularity was simple. It was an incredibly generous and versatile flavor bomb. And, like Alexander's, it was a plant of total utilization, where every single part had a purpose. The leaves were the most commonly used part. A single, fresh young leaf, finely chopped, was often enough to season an entire cauldron of pottage or stew, imparting its deep, savory, celery-like warmth. The thick, hollow stems of the young plant could be peeled and eaten as a vegetable, but more famously, they were candied. Much like angelica, the stems were simmered in a sugar syrup until they became a sweet, aromatic, and slightly chewy confection, a popular treat. When the plant flowered, producing large, flat-topped umbels of small yellow flowers, it would later produce seeds. These small, ribbed seeds have an intense flavor, like a combination of celery seed, parsley, and fennel. They were a prized spice, used to flavor breads, cakes, and biscuits, or sprinkled over dishes as a pungent seasoning. Even the large, thick taproot was used. It could be grated and used as a vegetable, or dried and powdered for its medicinal properties. And its medicinal use was significant, as hinted by its Latin name, officinale, which marks it as a plant that was officially recognized and stored in an apothecary's storeroom, or officina. Lovage was the medieval Pepto-Bismol, but with a much more aggressive marketing campaign. It was famous as a carminative, an herb that aids digestion, relieves bloating, and settles an upset stomach. A cordial or tea made from its leaves or seeds was a standard household remedy for all manner of digestive complaints. It was also used as a diuretic and in treatments for coughs, fevers, and sore throats. This is the source of a scholarly debate. Historians of medicine still argue about the primary reason for Lovage's esteemed place in medieval apothecaries. Was its reputation as a cure-all based on genuine, observable therapeutic effects? Its volatile oils do have diuretic and antiseptic properties. Or was its incredibly potent, almost medicinal aroma the main factor, convincing people of its power through a form of sensory suggestion, in line with the idea that strongly scented plants must have strong effects? But Lovage had another, more romantic and mysterious reputation, which is a wonderful, quirky tidbit of folklore. It was widely considered to be an aphrodisiac, a potent love charm. Its very name, Lovage, is thought to be a corruption of love ache, with ache being an old French word for parsley. Cordials made with lovage, sugar, and wine were popular as love potions. It was also believed that carrying a piece of the dried root in your pocket would make you more attractive to the opposite sex. A woman might slip a dried lovage leaf into the pocket of a man she admired, hoping its powerful magic would win his heart. It was the secret weapon of the medieval romantic. You decide to harvest a single, small leaf from the giant plant. That, you know, will be more than enough. You take it back to the kitchen, and as you chop it, the powerful, savory scent fills the entire room. You add the tiny amount of chopped leaf to your pottage, and the effect is transformative. It deepens and enriches the flavor of everything in the pot, adding a warmth and complexity that wasn't there before. It's a magical ingredient, but one that must be used with extreme respect. Using too much lovage is not a mistake you make twice. Its flavor is so powerful it would completely dominate every other ingredient, turning your meal into a relentless, one-note symphony of celery. This overwhelming power is likely the reason for its modern obscurity. As European cuisine evolved after the Middle Ages, tastes began to shift towards more delicate, subtle, and refined flavors. The bombastic, all-consuming flavor of lovage began to seem rustic, coarse, and old-fashioned. It was the flavor equivalent of shouting in a library. It was slowly replaced in the garden by the much milder celery and parsley, plants that would whisper rather than roar. You eat your lovage-scented meal, appreciating its uncompromising strength. It is a flavor from a bolder, less timid time. Your palate is expanding, your understanding of the medieval flavor landscape growing deeper. You now have the wild, pungent outlaw, Alexanders, and the cultivated, even more powerful Titan, Lovage. This thought about potent, complex, and almost medicinal herbs makes you glance towards another corner of your garden. There, a patch of feathery, fern-like leaves is topped with clusters of flowers that look like bright yellow buttons. You know this plant. Its aroma is just as powerful as lovage, but stranger, more bitter, and more controversial. It is a plant of both desserts and dangers, a flavor so bold that it was truly only for the fearless medieval foodie. The uncompromising, savory power of lovage has redefined your understanding of what an herb can be. It's not just a gentle seasoning. It can be the heart and soul of a dish, a flavor so potent it demands respect. This experience with such a dominant, almost medicinal tasting plant leads you to another corner of the herb garden, to a patch of foliage that is just as aromatic, but in a completely different way. It is a plant with a beautiful appearance, a bitter taste, and a reputation that is both celebrated and dangerous. You are about to meet the most fearless foodie's flower, Tansy. You approach a tall, handsome plant with stems that can reach up to your waist. Its leaves are a deep, dark green, feathery and fern-like, finely divided into smaller leaflets that give it a delicate, intricate appearance. But its true identity is in its flowers. Atop the stems are dense, flat-topped clusters of what look like bright yellow buttons. They are simple, striking, and entirely lack the soft, ray-like petals of a daisy. You reach out and rub a leaf between your fingers. An intense aroma immediately fills the air. It's a sharp, powerful, and deeply medicinal scent, camphorous, a little bitter, with a hint of spice. It doesn't smell entirely like food. It smells like a cure for something. And a cure it was. But first, let's talk about its most famous and peculiar culinary use. This brings us to a wonderful, quirky tidbit of food history. Tansy was the essential ingredient in a special dish served at Easter, the tansy cake, or sometimes a tansy pudding or omelette. After the long, bland, 40-day fast of Lent, the first rich foods of Easter were a shock to the system. Tansy, with its intensely bitter flavor, was believed to be a purifying herb, a medicinal tonic that would cleanse the body of any lingering toxins from the winter and prepare the stomach for the rich Easter feast. It was also seen as a symbol of the bitter herbs of the Jewish Passover Seder, connecting the Christian festival back to its ancient roots. These tansies, as the dishes were called, were a kind of custardy, green-flecked pudding or cake, flavored with a small amount of the bitter herb. They were an acquired taste, to be sure, but for centuries, the bitter flavor of tansy was the official taste of Easter spring. But the plant's primary role in the medieval household was far more practical, which brings us to a crucial mainstream fact. Tansy was one of the most important medicinal and utility herbs of its time. Its strong, camphor-like scent made it a powerful insect repellent. Before the advent of modern insecticides, tansy was a vital tool for household hygiene. The leaves were dried and strewn amongst rushes on the floor to deter fleas. Bunches of it were hung in pantries to keep flies away from food. Most importantly, it was used as a preservative. The name Tanacetum is thought to derive from the Greek word athanasia, meaning immortality, because the herb was used to pack and rub on corpses to help preserve them for burial. Its medicinal uses were even more significant. It was the go-to remedy for a very common medieval ailment, intestinal worms. A tea or potion made from tansy was a powerful vermifuge used to expel parasites from the digestive system. In a world without modern sanitation, this was an essential, if unpleasant, piece of household medicine. A food that can deworm you and repel moths from your clothes probably isn't going to make the menu at your favorite modern brunch spot. But this very potency is also what made tansy a dangerous and controversial plant. The same chemical compound in the plant that makes it such an effective insecticide and vermifuge, a substance called thujone, is toxic to humans in large doses. In medieval herbal medicine, tansy was also known as a powerful emmenagogue and abortifacient, an herb that could be used to induce menstruation or, in higher doses, to terminate a pregnancy. This gave it a dual reputation. It was a respected medicinal herb, but it was also a plant of hidden, and sometimes forbidden, female knowledge. This leads to a complex scholarly debate. Historians and ethnobotanists still argue about the social context of tansy's use as an abortifacient. Was this knowledge widely and openly shared among women as a form of folk medicine for controlling family size? Or was it a more hidden, underground knowledge, practiced by only a few and fraught with social and religious danger, whispered about in secret rather than openly prescribed? This dangerous duality is precisely why the plant has vanished from our kitchens. As medical knowledge advanced and safer alternatives became available, its medicinal uses faded. And as culinary tastes shifted towards milder, less bitter flavors, its aggressive taste fell out of fashion. What was once an essential household multitasking herb became seen as a toxic weed. You decide to experience this flavor of the past. You won't be making a full tansy pudding. You're not quite that fearless, but the innkeeper's wife has made a batch of small, sweet biscuits with a tiny amount of the chopped fresh leaf baked into them. She offers you one. It looks like a simple oat cake, but it is flecked with green and has that same, sharp, medicinal aroma. You take a bite. The flavor is a shock. It is overwhelmingly aromatic, the camphor-like taste flooding your senses, followed by a powerful, lingering bitterness that makes your tongue tingle. There is a hint of sweetness from the biscuit, but it's fighting a losing battle against the herb. It's not an entirely unpleasant taste, but it is definitely not a comforting one. It is a flavor that feels like it's doing something to you, a flavor with a purpose. You now understand the medieval herb garden on a deeper level. It is not just a place of pleasant tastes and smells to make food more interesting. It is a living apothecary, a powerful toolkit of plants that can heal, preserve, and, of nature, captured and contained within the garden walls. To cook with them is to wield a piece of that wild power, and it requires knowledge, respect, and a healthy dose of courage. You have a new appreciation for the complexity of this small patch of earth. It is a place of contradictions. The same plant that might soothe a stomach ache could, in a different dose, be a dangerous poison. The herb that makes a cake to celebrate the resurrection was also used to preserve the dead for their final rest. This garden is a constant reminder that in the medieval world, life and death, healing and harm, are always growing side by side, their roots tangled together in the same dark soil. You look at the bright yellow, deceptively cheerful flowers of the tansy, and you understand that this is not just a garden. It's a library of potent and sometimes dangerous secrets, and you have only just begun to read the first page. The intense, almost overwhelming flavors of these summer herbs, born of the rich, dark soil of your sheltered garden, leave you craving something entirely different. Your palate, shocked and educated by the bitter tansy and the bombastic lovage, longs for a cleaner, simpler taste. You find your thoughts drifting away from this enclosed, managed world, out towards the wild edges of the land. You imagine the coastline, a place of wind and waves, where the air is scoured clean by salt spray and the ground is a harsh mix of sand and shingle. What, you wonder, could possibly grow there? What kind of hardy, resilient vegetable could make a home in such a hostile place, and what would it taste like? It seems an impossible question, but you have a feeling the land has an answer waiting for you, right where the waves meet the shore. Your mind is still buzzing with the potent, almost aggressive aromas of the summer herb garden. The bitter memory of tansy and the booming, savory voice of Lovage have taught you that the medieval garden was a place of powerful and sometimes dangerous forces. It has left you with a longing for something cleaner, simpler, a flavor that speaks not of the rich, dark, complicated soil of a sheltered garden, but of something wilder and more elemental. And so, you have left the enclosed world of the manor and traveled, your journey taking you to the very edge of the land. You are walking along a coastal path. The air here is completely different. It's sharp, clean, and alive with the taste of salt. The gentle hum of the garden has been replaced by the rhythmic crash and sigh of the waves against a shingle beach and the constant, lonely cry of gulls overhead. The landscape is stark and beautiful. There are no neat rows of vegetables here, no protective fences. There is just the endless gray sea, the wide open sky, and a sloping beach of stones and sand where it seems nothing could possibly grow. But you are about to discover that even here, in this harsh and windswept place, the wild pantry provides. You make your way down onto the beach, your boots slipping and crunching on the loose shingle. And there, just above the high tide line, you see them. Low, sprawling mounds of one of the strangest and most beautiful vegetables you have ever seen. This is sea kale, or Crambe maritima. The plant forms a handsome clump of large, wavy, and slightly crinkled leaves. Their color is a remarkable silvery blue-green, and their surface is covered in a waxy bloom that makes them look almost unreal, like something sculpted from metal or stone. They look tough, ancient, and perfectly at home in this rugged landscape. Sea kale is a halophyte, a plant that has adapted to thrive in salty conditions that would kill most other vegetables. It is a true survivor, a testament to the tenacity of life in the harshest of environments. For centuries, it has been a vital, free food source for the people living along these coastlines. This is a mainstream historical fact. For coastal communities in the medieval period, sea kale and other wild sea vegetables were a critical defense against scurvy. The young shoots, which appear in the very early spring, are incredibly rich in vitamin C for a fishing village at the end of a long winter. The appearance of sea kale was not just a sign of spring, it was a lifesaver. You are here in the early spring, the perfect time to harvest. You are not looking for the large, tough outer leaves. You are looking for the young shoots, just as they begin to emerge from the shingle. And you are going to use a special technique, a piece of ancient foraging wisdom, which brings us to a wonderful quirky tidbit. To get the best tasting sea kale, you must blanch it. You find a young plant just beginning to send up its shoots, and you heap a large pile of loose shingle and sand over its crown, burying it in a small mound. Alternatively, you could find a large, overturned pot or a wooden bucket and place it over the plant. By depriving the emerging shoots of light, you prevent them from producing chlorophyll. Instead of tough and green, they will grow pale, white, and incredibly tender. It's a bit like giving your wild vegetable a spa treatment with a bucket of rocks. You find a plant that was covered a few weeks ago. You carefully push away the shingle, and underneath, you find your reward. A cluster of thick, ivory-white shoots, tinged with a beautiful pale purple, looking for all the world like a strange, exotic form of asparagus. You snap them off at the base. They feel crisp and heavy in your hand. The existence of this wild, foraged delicacy raises an interesting question for historians. Archaeologists and food historians still debate the extent of inland trade of foraged coastal foods like sea kale in the medieval period. While it was clearly a staple for coastal populations, it's uncertain how far its consumption spread. Did inland markets regularly feature these sea vegetables, brought in by coastal traders? Or were they a localized secret, their unique flavor unknown to anyone living more than a day's journey from the shore? Was this a taste that belonged only to the people of the coast? You decide not to wait to get back to a proper kitchen. You build a small fire on the beach with driftwood and steam your bundle of blanched sea kale shoots in a pot with a little seawater. As they cook, they release a wonderful, clean aroma, like cabbage and nuts with a hint of the fresh sea breeze. You take a bite of a tender, steaming shoot. The flavor is a revelation. It is unlike any other green you have ever tasted. It has the mild, nutty sweetness of asparagus, the satisfying brassica bite of a young cabbage, and a delicate, clean, and ever so slight brininess that reminds you of its seaside home. It is delicious, a truly gourmet experience from a plant growing wild on a stony beach. You can also eat the leaves and the flower heads. The young leaves, when boiled, are a wonderful alternative to cabbage, and the unopened flower buds can be cooked like broccoli florets. It is another generous, multi-purpose plant, a true gift of the sea. You sit on the beach, eating your sea kale and watching the waves. You feel a deep sense of wonder. You have just made a delicious and nourishing meal from a plant that thrives in what seemed like a barren wasteland. You have explored the rich soil of the cultivated garden, the chaotic abundance of the hedgerow, and now, the stark and salty world of the coast. Your understanding of the medieval food landscape is growing wider and richer. You are learning that food is everywhere, if you only know how and where to look. The unique nature of the sea kale sticks in your mind. It is a wild plant, but it responds to a human touch, the act of blanching, to become a delicacy. It has a dual nature, a foot in both the wild world and the cultivated one. This thought makes you curious about other plants that might have a similar double identity. Not as a wild and cultivated food, but in an even more fundamental way. You've heard tales of a common plant, a staple in many gardens, that is known to the world for one very famous purpose, but that secretly held a second, hidden identity as a source of food. A plant that could both dye your clothes a brilliant blue and fill your stomach when times were tough. Your journey along the coast has been a revelation, the taste of the sea kale a clean, savory memory. It was a plant of two natures, wild, yet welcoming a human touch to transform it into a delicacy. This idea of a plant with a dual identity has taken hold in your mind, and it leads you away from the shingle beaches and back inland, towards the cultivated fields. You are in search of another plant with two faces, a plant that everyone in this era knows and recognizes for one famous, and famously smelly, purpose, but which holds a secret, edible life that has been almost entirely forgotten. You arrive at a field dedicated to its cultivation. What you see is a dense crop of leafy green plants. In their first year of growth, they form a rosette of long, blue-green leaves, a bit like spinach but with a smoother, waxy texture. If it were the second year, the plants would have shot up a tall stalk, topped with a bright, cheerful cluster of small, four-petaled yellow flowers. This is Woad, or Asatis tinctoria, a plant whose name is synonymous with one thing above all else, the color blue. This is the plant's primary, public identity. Woad was the sole source of blue dye for textiles in Europe for thousands of years, an incredibly valuable cash crop that made fortunes for the farmers who grew it and the merchants who traded it. This brings us to the mainstream historical fact of its notoriously foul processing. To extract the blue pigment, the leaves are harvested, crushed into a pulp, and then hand-kneaded into balls. These balls are left to dry and ferment, after which they are ground into a powder. But the real magic, and the real stench, happens in the dyer's workshop. The powdered woad is mixed into a large vat with a reducing agent to make the indigo pigment soluble. The most readily available and effective reducing agent in the medieval world? Stale urine. The vat would be kept warm and left to ferment for days, releasing an eye-watering, deeply unpleasant ammoniac stench. The smell was so powerful that Queen Elizabeth I is said to have issued a proclamation banning woad dyers from working within 5 miles of any of her royal residences. It was a high price to pay for a fashionable indigo cloak. But this famous dye plant has a secret. It is a member of the Brassicaceae family, the same family as cabbage, mustard, and your recently harvested turnip greens. And just like its cousins, its young leaves are edible. This is the plant's second world, its hidden identity as a source of food. While the mature leaves used for dyeing are too tough and pungent to eat, the fresh, tender leaves of the first-year plant were a known, if not always celebrated, pother. This dual nature was not lost on the medieval mind, which often saw plants as having multiple virtues. Woad wasn't just a dye and a food, it also had a place in the medicine chest. This is a fascinating, quirky tidbit. A poultice made from the fresh woad leaves was a well-known folk remedy for wounds. The plant has natural astringent properties, and applying the crushed leaves directly to a cut or sore was believed to stop bleeding, reduce inflammation, and prevent infection. It's a strange and wonderful symmetry. The same plant that ancient Britons supposedly used as a blue war paint to make them look more terrifying in battle was also used to heal the wounds that battle inflicted. You gather a handful of the youngest, most tender-looking woad leaves. They have a slightly peppery, cabbage-like smell. Back in the kitchen, you know that they must be cooked thoroughly. Woad greens are known for their bitterness, a quality that could be mellowed by boiling them, often in more than one change of water. You drop them into the pottage pot and let them simmer for a long time. They are not a delicacy. They are a food of necessity, a useful spring green or a fallback in times when other, more palatable vegetables are scarce. When you taste the pottage, the flavor of the woad is present but not overwhelming, a slightly bitter, peppery note, like a tougher, more serious version of spinach. It is hearty and nourishing, a taste of pure function over form. The eventual decline of woad as a major crop is the subject of a scholarly debate. Historians and economic scholars still argue about the primary driver behind the collapse of the woad industry in the 16th and 17th centuries. Was it simply the arrival of imported indigo dye from plantations in India and the Americas, which produced a more concentrated, color-fast blue and was easier to process? Or was it a series of protectionist trade wars and heavy taxation levied by European governments trying to control the lucrative dye market, which ultimately crippled the once thriving woad farming communities? It was likely a combination of both. a superior foreign product and disastrous economic policy that brought an end to the age of Woad. As the dye industry vanished, the memory of Woad as a food plant faded with it. You finish your meal, reflecting on this strange plant of two worlds. It is a powerful reminder of the resourcefulness of the medieval mindset. Nothing had just one purpose. The same sheep gave you wool for your clothes, meat for your table, and milk for your cheese. The same forest gave you wood for your fire, nuts and berries for your pot, and acorns for your pigs. And the same plant could give you a beautiful blue for your tunic and a dose of bitter greens for your pottage. It was a world without waste, where every resource was understood in its entirety. This experience with a food that is not immediately delicious, that requires a special process to make it palatable, gets you thinking. The bitterness of the Woad had to be boiled away. This idea of transforming something inedible into something enjoyable through a specific process reminds you of a very peculiar fruit you've seen growing on a thorny tree in the orchard. A fruit that, if you were to pick it and bite into it now, would be rock hard and mouth-puckeringly sour. A fruit that, according to folklore, must be left to spoil, to literally begin to rot, before it reveals its hidden, delicious sweetness. Your experience with Woad, the plant of two worlds, has left you with a new understanding of the medieval pantry. You've learned that a plant can be both a common dye and a humble food, and that some flavors are not meant to be simply enjoyed, but endured out of necessity. The process of boiling the bitterness out of the Woad leaves has you thinking about the other ways that medieval people transformed the unpalatable into the delicious. This thought leads you out of the fields and into the orchard on a crisp, late autumn day. The air smells of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Most of the trees are bare, their harvest of apples and pears long since gathered and stored. But you are heading for one specific tree, a gnarled, thorny specimen, where a strange and stubborn fruit still clings to the bare branches. You are here to meet the Medlar, or Mespelus germanica, the most bizarre and counterintuitive fruit of the medieval world. You look up at the tree and see the fruit hanging there, small, brown, and hard, each one looking like a large, woody rosehip. But its most noticeable feature, and the one that has garnered it a rather unfortunate reputation, is its wide, open calyx, the five-pointed, leaf-like structures at its base. This puckered, open end gives the fruit a distinct appearance that has led to some very rude nicknames. This brings us to a quirky and very earthy tidbit of medieval humor. In Chaucer's England, the Medlar was commonly and bluntly known as the open ass, a name he uses in the Reeve's Tale. The French were no more polite, calling it cul de chien, or dog's bottom. It's a fruit that practically invites mockery. You reach up and pick one. It's as hard as a small stone. If you were to bite into it now, your mouth would be flooded with a horrifically astringent, tannic flavor that would make a bitter sloe seem sweet by comparison. The fruit in this state is completely inedible. And this is where the Medlar's great secret lies. Unlike almost any other fruit, which is prized for its crisp freshness, the Medlar must undergo a process of controlled decay before it can be enjoyed. This process is called bledding. This is a mainstream historical fact that separates the Medlar from all other fruits. Bledding is not simply ripening. It is a post-harvest enzymatic breakdown of the fruit's flesh. The fruit is harvested very late in the year, traditionally after the first hard frost, which helps to kick-start the process. You would then lay the hard, brown fruits out on a bed of clean straw in a cool, dark place, with their open ends pointing up, and you would simply wait. For weeks. Slowly, miraculously, the starches and harsh tannins within the fruit begin to break down, converting into sugars. The fruit's hard flesh softens, its skin darkens and wrinkles, and it begins to look, for all the world, like a small, sad, rotten apple. This strange requirement for decay before delight has made the medlar a potent symbol in literature, which has led to a long-running scholarly debate. Literary historians still argue about the symbolic meaning of the medlar in the works of Chaucer and Shakespeare. Was its association with decay and ripeness a profound metaphor for the idea that wisdom, maturity, and even pleasure can only be achieved after a process of humbling decay or seeming corruption? Or was it, as its rude nicknames suggest, simply used as a bawdy joke, a symbol of prostitution, decay, and things that are rotten before they are ripe? Shakespeare himself uses it this way in As You Like It, making a rather crude pun about the fruit. Was it a profound philosophical symbol, or just a dirty joke? The truth is likely a bit of both. You, however, are not interested in literary theory. You are hungry. Let's imagine you have been patient. Weeks have passed since the harvest, and you go to your pantry to check on your medlars. You pick one up. The once rock-hard fruit is now completely soft to the touch, its skin a deep, dark brown and finely wrinkled. It looks and feels like it has gone bad. You might be tempted to throw it away. But you press on. You tear the thin skin at the wide end, and you squeeze. Out comes a thick, dark, custardy pulp, the color and texture of apple butter or date paste. You take a small taste. The experience is revelatory. The horrific astringency is completely gone, replaced by a deep, rich, and complex sweetness. The flavor is like nothing else. It's a luscious combination of spiced apple sauce, cinnamon, and stewed pears, with a pleasant, wine-like tang and a texture as smooth as pudding. It is an absolutely delicious, ready-made dessert, a natural fruit puree provided by a process that looks like spoilage but is in fact perfection. It's a fruit that teaches a profound lesson in patience and in not judging things by their appearance. It's a bit like a grumpy old man who is only pleasant to be around after he's had a very, very long nap. Medlars were a beloved and common fruit in the medieval world, cultivated since the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans. They were eaten just as you are eating one now, scooped fresh from the skin, or they were used to make jellies, tarts, and a sweet, thick preserve known as medlar cheese. It was a familiar and welcome winter treat, a burst of complex sweetness long after the last fresh apple was gone. You finish your blended medlar, the rich, spicy sweet flavor a delight. You marvel at the strange alchemy of the fruit, a process that turns something hard and inedible into a soft, luscious treat through nothing more than time and a little bit of benign neglect. You have now journeyed through so much of the medieval food year. You've dug for the sweet and savory roots of winter, enjoyed the first green shoots and leaves of spring, seasoned your food with the powerful herbs of summer, and now, you have tasted the strange and wonderful fruit of late autumn. The year is drawing to its close. The last of the medlars are bleeding on the straw, the days are growing short and cold, and the first hints of real winter are in the air. Your thoughts turn once more to the garden, to what few fresh things might be left to sustain you through the coming snows. You remember seeing a small, humble plant with tender green leaves forming a low rosette on the cold soil, a plant you have so far ignored. You've been told it's a salad green with a very confusing name, and that, unlike almost everything else, the cold weather actually makes it taste better. The rich, wine-like sweetness of the bledded medlar is a final, decadent gift from the autumn orchard. It is a lesson in patience, a reminder that sometimes the most delicious things in life require a process that looks a lot like decay. But now, autumn has fully given way to winter. The days are short and the nights are long and cold. The last of the apples are stored in the cellar, the grains are in their sacks, and a hard frost now coats the garden each morning. The cycle of the year has almost come full circle, and you find yourself once again looking for what little fresh green life can withstand the encroaching ice. You walk out into the garden, your breath pluming in the frigid air. Most of the beds are bare earth, sleeping under a thin blanket of frost. But in a patch that was harvested weeks ago, a humble little plant is not just surviving, it is thriving. You see dozens of small, low-growing rosettes of tender-looking leaves, their deep green color a startling and beautiful contrast against the pale, frozen ground. This is the last hero of the medieval garden, a plant with a truly confusing identity crisis, corn salad. You've heard it called by many names. Some call it match, others lamb's lettuce. But its most common, and most misleading, name is corn salad. You know for a fact it has absolutely nothing to do with corn. So, where did the name come from? The answer lies in the shifting meaning of a single word. In Old and Middle English, the word corn did not refer to the yellow maize we know today, which was a crop from the Americas and unknown in medieval Europe. Instead, corn was the generic term for any cereal grain, wheat, barley, rye, or oats. This humble little plant was a common and prolific weed that would spring up in the cornfields after the main grain harvest in the autumn. Peasants would go out into the stubble of the harvested fields to forage for these tender green rosettes. And so, it became known as the salad from the cornfield, or corn salad. You kneel down and touch one of the leaves. It is surprisingly soft and velvety, with a smooth, spoon-like shape. The plant's greatest superpower is its incredible tolerance for cold. While most other greens would be turned to a blackened mush by the first hard frost, corn salad endures. In fact, the cold actually improves it. The frost triggers the plant to produce more sugars, which act as a natural antifreeze, and in doing so, transforms its flavor from merely mild to wonderfully sweet and nutty. It is the true champion of the winter garden. For most of its history, this plant was a foraged gift of the fields. This is a mainstream historical fact. The widespread cultivation of corn salad as a dedicated garden crop is a relatively recent phenomenon, really only taking off in France in the 17th century, where it was championed by King Louis XIV's royal gardener. Before that, for thousands of years, it was simply a common, wild edible that people knew they could rely on when the grain was gone and the ground was hard. Its other charming name, lamb's lettuce, is the source of a pleasant, quirky tidbit. The name is thought to have two origins. Firstly, It was an observation that sheep and lambs, when led out into the pastures in early spring, would eagerly seek out and devour the tender rosettes. Secondly, the leaves were often among the first wild greens to appear in the spring, their arrival coinciding with the birth of the new season's lambs. It was a gentle marker of the turning year, a sign of new life. It's certainly a more poetic name than that of its wild relative, the fat hen. But how much of a difference could this little green really make? This is the subject of a scholarly debate. Nutrition historians still debate the full impact of reliable winter greens like corn salad on the health of the medieval peasantry. While we now know it to be incredibly nutritious, rich in vitamin C, iron, and unusually for a green, omega-3 fatty acids, was it gathered in sufficient quantities to truly ward off the chronic deficiencies of a winter diet? Or was it merely a pleasant but infrequent addition to the pottage pot, a garnish of survival, rather than a true dietary staple that could keep scurvy at bay? Its true role in the larger nutritional landscape remains a mystery. You gather a handful of the cold, crisp rosettes. Unlike the tough, bitter greens you've encountered, corn salad is so tender that it was one of the few plants in the medieval world that was commonly eaten as a fresh, raw salad. You pop a small leaf into your mouth. The texture is wonderfully soft and buttery, and the flavor is delicate, mild, and nutty. There is no bitterness, no peppery kick, just a gentle, pleasing greenness. It is the cashmere sweater of the salad world, soft, comforting, and surprisingly warm in its own way. Back in the kitchen, you rinse the rosettes and toss them with a simple dressing of oil and vinegar. It is a rare and wonderful treat, a fresh, crisp salad in the dead of winter. It tastes clean, vital, and alive. It is a quiet, gentle end to the long culinary journey you have been on, a final, whispered promise from the sleeping earth. You have now come full circle. Your year in the forgotten pantry is complete. You began in the scarcity of late winter, digging for the sweet, pale roots of skirret. You moved through the first green shoots of spring with good King Henry, enjoyed the robust leaves of the turnip and the wild fat hen, and seasoned your meals with the bold, untamed flavors of Alexander's, Lovage, and Tansy. You tasted the magic of the sea in the coastal kale, saw the two worlds of the Woad plant, and learned the patient, bizarre secret of the autumn medlar. And now, you end your journey here, with the soft, nutty leaves of corn salad, a final green gift before the deep sleep of winter truly sets in. You have a profound new respect for the knowledge and resourcefulness of the people who came before you, who knew the secrets of 100 different plants and who composed the symphony of their survival from the notes that the wild and cultivated land provided. And now, as our own journey comes to its quiet close, allow the cool, crisp memory of that winter garden to gently fade from your mind. Let the feeling of the cold earth and the taste of those hardy, forgotten greens dissolve into the warmth and comfort of the present moment. The challenging year of the medieval gardener is over. Their work is done, and the time for a long and well-deserved rest has finally come for them, and for you. There are no more roots to dig, no more wild herbs to forage, no more strange and demanding fruits to prepare. All that is left is the deep peace that follows a journey well-traveled, a story fully told. Feel the comforting weight of your own blanket, the softness of your own pillow, a luxury of ease and security those gardeners of the past could scarcely have imagined. The world of their constant toil and brilliant resilience can now drift away, becoming a soft, distant echo. Let the details blur and the images soften, as you allow your mind to empty and your body to grow heavy with sleep. Let the gentle cadence of the story be the last thing you hold on to, as you drift peacefully and effortlessly into your own quiet and restorative slumber. End of script. Sweet dreams.